Travel. I'm pleased to host you once more for Conversations That Grow. So the last two conversations we had was a physical conversation or workshop that we had that was hosted by Mr. Pali Nake from National Treasury, talking about guidelines for travel policy formulation. We also had an online conversation, providing tips and trends, challenges that travel buyers could look at when it comes to travel policy. But today, we'd like to dive into the life of a frequent business traveler. So, Kovilan has come up with a new term called the serial traveler. So, it's really not about just the logistics, but talking about the real life challenges and opportunities that come with being on the road frequently. Kovilan Naidoo is the senior manager of internal audit and advisory at Cummins. He is extensively well traveled for work, and he's here to share what it's really like for him, talking about managing expenses, staying productive, dealing with stresses that come along the way, as well as covering the long-term impacts of frequent travel. We'll also explore how travel buyers and suppliers can better support travelers such as Kovilan through smarter policies, better tools, and human-centered services. So we'll run it as a Q&A discussion where I'll lead the conversation with Kovilan, exploring the trends, challenges, and opportunities. Then also we are opening the floor for any questions. So we've got the chat functionality open. So as we're speaking, if any thoughts come up or questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. And it will help us just to engage directly with yourselves and also hear your thoughts. Finally, we'll have our closing remarks and share some actionable takeaways after the session. So, Kovilan, welcome. It's great to have you with us again. Please tell us and the audience a little bit more about yourself.
Hi, everybody. Really excited to be doing this session. I've been on both sides of the fence. So I've worked in travel management. I've was a travel manager. I've done the sourcing of it, so working with suppliers, done the compliance piece, and I've done them as projects in a last life. And so, I've moved away back into my core niche, which is finance, and so back into finance. So it's still something that I keep on top of. It's something that I still watch in terms of what's happening in the industry, and pretty much still involved in the business travel industry, although I've moved on and, moved into my niche function, which is finance. But yeah, still pretty much involved. It's an exciting space. It's dynamic. It changes all the time. So I'm always watching what's happening, what's next and what's in the space.
Yeah, I think it's actually great to have someone who is, I call, an ally to the travel industry at large, but also you actually understand the travelers' challenges when they're on the road, especially post-COVID, right? However, the reality of business travel is changing. It's a fast-moving landscape, and what is something that people often get wrong about business travel? From a supplier perspective, traveler perspective as well, new travelers that are coming into the space, as well as the industry at large.
Yes. So as I go through, I've got some talking points. You might see me like turn my head to another direction because I do have another screen up where I want to make sure I touch on these points. So just bear with me if that does happen. I think, when we think business travel, everyone thinks it's glamorous. And, you get to travel for work, you get to see different places, and, it's like all of this, and, it's paid for by your company. And so I think that level of glamour that goes along with it. And so everyone looks at it and says, it's the best job to have if you get that element of travel. And so, and I think it is to some degree. And I think, when you first start with it, you're like, oh, it's amazing. You're getting to see new places, you're getting to experience different cultures, and, it is something that you enjoy, but then I think after a while it becomes just too much, and I think you end up with burnout. And I think that not many people realize that is that there is that element of glamour at the first, but then when it becomes a part of the job and it's starting to become routine and it's becoming frequent, that's different. And I think that's when it's now down to your travel manager to then manage the traveler's expectations and also manage, what's happening with the traveler, what's the experiences and stuff like that. So if you don't watch it, it can lead to burnout and fatigue really quickly, especially in my space, because, as I say, serial traveler. I started doing the travel with my role in 2014. And so at 2014, it used to be 2 weeks in a month for travel back home for 2 weeks. Some months I travel for 3 weeks back home. And so it became a constant rotation every month. And so, you know, it was fine for the first few years, then it became a bit too much. And then, in 2019, I was ready to like find another job, figure out, what next? Because the travel element of it now was becoming a bit too much. I wanted consistency. And then COVID happened, which gave me a break from all the business travel. And so, it's been 2 years of just not traveling and working remotely. And I think that was the good thing, is that it gave me that break. But then, with that level of flexibility and, getting back to travel, I managed to negotiate that I don't travel as much, reduced it to a maximum of 2 weeks in a month and not every month. And so, just looking at how do we reduce it and get that balance. And also that's where I am right now, is that, post COVID, I'm not traveling as much and, I've got that balance. So I think that's what I think people need to realize, is that, yes, it's exciting. Yes, there's that glamour element, but on the other side, the experience can be very different depending on how frequently you travel.
Yeah. So, I mean, Kovilan, you've traveled quite extensively, and just as just on a lighter note, if you could approximate, I mean, how many countries have you traveled to in terms of the globe, or maybe if you had to approximate it in miles, what would
Oh,
that
so
look
I
like?
track that. So I track how many countries I've traveled to, and collectively with leisure travel and business travel, because I love traveling, and leisure travel is very different from business. But I just hit country number 86 in April.
Wow. So do you have like one passport, two passports? How do you navigate the visa
Ah,
situation? Obviously, we don't have the best passports in the world.
so it's pretty complex, and I think we're one of the few countries where you're allowed to have multiple passports. So not many countries allow it. And so I actually have four passports that are valid at the moment, four different passport numbers, one, and all of them are not expired. So one of them, all the pages are gone and they're maxi passports. The other three that I have are pretty much maxi passports. One I only use for leisure travel. The other two I use for business travel. And so if I need to get a visa for one, so let's say, for example, I'm in the UK right now and I need to travel next month, I need a visa. My one passport sitting in an embassy right now for the visa for my travel for June. I'm traveling on another passport. And so you just manage that in terms of how you swing those passports for your various trips. So that's what I basically do. But you need to be able to demonstrate frequent travel. So I'd be able to do that with Home Affairs. And then you need to keep all your passports, because whenever you go for a new passport, you need to take your passport and say, hey, this passport's finished. There's no pages left. I need a new passport. I need a new maxi passport. And so that's the good thing, is that Home Affairs has that level of flexibility. When you're able to demonstrate frequent travel, you can have multiple passports, multiple maxi passports, and you don't get penalized for it.
Wow, that's amazing. So just managing then the logistics of booking, of making your travel arrangements and making sure that you're getting the best of return on investment for your time, as well as for the organization. In your organization currently, so we know a lot of companies have evolved from the traditional servicing model where you have a high human touch, and have evolved to more technology and online booking tools. In your current organization, you do not have travel arrangers, or what we call travel bookers, dedicated travel bookers. How do you just walk us through on how you manage your own bookings, and what do you think would make complex bookings more easier for you as today?
So I love the concept of being involved in my own travel. There's no middleman between myself and the TMC. So, there's no back and forth. And what I like about it is that I'm in full control of my bookings, and, I can book whenever I want to. So the one of the things at Cummins is that, we have an online booking tool that's pretty robust. It's so flexible. And that's what I love about it, is that I have access to 24/7. And if I make a booking that's not too complex, it will issue the ticket immediately, provided that the approvals go through. So, it's real time, 24/7. That's the one thing I like about it, is that, I can book online. Not every traveler at Cummins has that ability to book international travel online. I can. So that does help me with my frequent travel. But I think that's what I like about it, is that I'm in control. I can see what I'm booking at that point in time. I can see what the airfare is. I can make that buying decision immediately, rather than getting quotes from a TMC, going through a travel booker. And if I'm not happy, I need to go back to the travel booker. The travel booker then needs to go back to the TMC. And there's that back and forth. And so with that, I can book within a few hours make a decision and make a booking. Whereas with the booker and then the traditional way of getting quotes is a lot of back and forth. And so that becomes a time-consuming process. So for me, I like being in control of my bookings and being able to do it myself. And I'll give you an example. Like right now, I was looking at changing my trip to go back to South Africa. I'm scheduled to go back on Friday, and I thought maybe I'll spend an additional week because I needed to go to some other sites. I said, let me just see what it's going to cost me to change that booking. I just logged on, went onto the online booking tool, and then checked next week, Thursday, what it will cost. The penalties, and so I immediately saw that it's going to cost me just 1,900 Rand in terms of the airfare difference and the change penalties. And if I clicked OK, done. I could do it
Wow.
immediately. No contact. And so, in 2 minutes, I can get that done. And that's what I like about it. No back and forth, no going to Booker, no back and forth to the TMC. And what I like about our online booking tool is that, if I made that decision that I want to change it at that point in time, I can hit change. It's going to route for approvals. Once it's approved, the system will make that change and reissue my e-ticket based on the new dates. There is no manual intervention. And I think that's what I like about it is that it's real time. No person needs to get involved. I understand with complex bookings, the system will not allow it. Like if I need to make a complex booking, it will quote it, but it will then stop the booking process and it will allow a travel consultant to then pick up that booking and then look at it to make sure it makes sense in terms of routing. Are there going to be any visa complications with it based on how this flight's going? And so then they will get involved. And what's nice about that is that the TMC has done their homework and realized, these are easy bookings. It doesn't need a consultant to intervene. But when it does come to a complex routing, it will stop it and like, okay, consultant needs to get involved in this booking. So that's quite nice as well. And that's where, we've partnered quite well with our TMC and the online booking tool that we use.
Yeah. So another aspect, obviously, it's quite fun to be out and about, being able to have the ease of booking, using technology. Then the tricky part is the administration of ensuring that your travel expenses, you're on top of them while staying within policy, right?
Mhm.
What challenges have you faced and how have you worked around them? Because the expense management part of it is quite a big component of managing travel.
It is. And then what I like is that, we are lucky that our expenses are all automated. So, I mean, we card in pocket. So every traveler has their own credit card. Any booking I make, any expense I incur goes onto my corporate card. My corporate card's then linked to a system. And these transactions all come through on the system, and then I can see them on the system. I then need to go in and then support those expenses with a receipt and then get my manager to prove it, and it's done. That's how the expense reporting system works. But what I like about it is that at any point in time, there's an app version of it. And as I incur an expense, so for example, I go and have a meal at a restaurant. When that invoice comes through, before I even leave the table, I will scan that invoice into the app and it's there and it's ready for attaching to the expense when the expense actually comes into the app. And then it's done. But also, on the supplier side, what's nice is that a lot of suppliers have started doing integration into our expense system. So, for example, your likes of certain merchants like Starbucks, Uber, Bolt, things like that. If I swipe a transaction with that merchant, they will automatically notify me that it's me. They will recognize it's me. The invoice will then automatically go into our expense system without me actually needing to do it. So that's a nice part about it is that it recognizes the credit card, it recognizes it's me. That receipt will automatically flow into our expense system. I just need to go and click submit for approval. Done. So,
So,
automation has helped me. And I think that's the key thing is that, if you've got that, it makes that process a lot more easier. And then
yeah.
also, with policy and compliance, our travel policy is built into the expense system. So it
Yeah.
will flag expenses that are that are not in line with policy, but also the expense system and our credit cards are pretty robust in the sense that I just can't swipe my credit card wherever I want to. So, for example, I walk into a casino, my credit card won't work.
Yeah.
So it's things like that where merchant codes come in and it limits you. So it's being able to manage it at the different touch points in terms of, policy compliance, which actually helps.
So I hear there's a lot of automation, a lot of technology. Obviously, there's the human aspect of it, right? What habits have you built up to stay on top of your expenses?
One of the things, as I indicated, was just make sure that every single time I have a receipt at a meal, I take a photo of it and I put it into the app. But there are instances like just the other day, I had a coffee at Starbucks and I just grabbed the coffee, walked out and realized, my invoice. I don't have it. I forgot to get one. But then I thought, yes, that's going to automatically come through. But in the instances where it doesn't, there are other avenues in terms of supporting it. So, like for me, I think that's the biggest one is, being able to use that technology and take photos of receipts, because that's the biggest pain point. Expense reporting is a pain point because at the end of a 2-week trip, I could have a stack of invoices like this. And then I need to spend hours putting that into the expense system. But if you do it as you go along each day, you don't have that problem. So
Yeah.
I've learned along the way, every single time I incur an expense, just make sure that receipt ends up in the expense system on that day.
So that segues quite well into my next question because yes, there's automation, there's technology. However, there is that balance between technology and
Mhm.
you having downtime. Let's talk about digital overload. How do you manage the stress or the pressures of being constantly always on, connected while traveling? I mean, you've just mentioned that every time you have a coffee, a normal person will have a coffee, take the receipt and throw it away, but you have to remember to take a picture of it, so you're constantly on the go, always on. It's quite interesting to understand how you balance the two.
Yes, so I think, when it comes to travel, you want to get everything done in that space of time that you're traveling. So, on a 2-week trip, I've got deadlines and I need to get those deadlines gone. So you're always connected. But it's being able to say, you know what, I need to shut down at this point in time and it's me time. And I think that's what I do is like there's a time where my laptop's off, I'm not touching it, my phone goes onto flight mode, it's me time and it's sitting on a desk and that's just me doing what I need to do, be it going for a walk or I actually have started traveling with my little TV box from home. So when I get to the hotel, I actually ensure that I plug in my TV box, I connect it to the Wi-Fi. So my TV at home is the TV that I have in my room. And there are certain days where I'm like, this is me time. I will literally go back, it's room service and it's TV, and I'm not connected. No one's getting a hold of me. No one's getting any contact with me because everything that I want to do from a device perspective is sitting on the desk and it's on flight mode. That's it.
Yeah.
Um, my work phone, I think what I've done is I've set boundaries. So, it's in our DNA to be online all the time and we constantly want to be responding and looking what's going on. But what I've done is that, if it's something important, there's levels of importance. If it's something where, the building's on fire, you need to get a hold of me right now, that's a phone call. If you're going to phone me, I'm going to pick up the phone and we're going to engage. Less important, I've got Teams on my phone. Send me a Teams message. I will action it at some point when I touch that phone of mine. And then the last one is that if it's not urgent, send me an email. I will action that email when I need to. So it's being able to say, this is my me time and I'm not going to be doing anything in terms of touching my devices or getting online, and then knowing what to do in that downtime. So for me, my downtime is either going for a walk, going to gym, or just sitting in my room and just watching TV. That's it.
So you've touched on boundaries, which I think is very important. However, you're a seasoned traveler, and you're able to navigate or professionally, manage the boundary side of things. But for lesser seasoned travelers, what do you think companies could do to better support, from a digital well-being perspective, to support the travelers and ensure that they are having that those boundaries set, because obviously there's also dynamics, so if somebody is still new in their role, they would want to do much more, or they probably don't know where the beginning and the end of things are, right? So, whatever the manager tells them to do has to happen, or the phone is always on because they're really starting to navigate the new role that they're in. So from a company perspective, then the responsibility will probably fall back to the company to support those kind of travelers and ensure that they're having that digital well-being. How do you think that could happen in travel today?
So for me, I really think it comes down to the organization's culture. It's in terms of what expectations do we set on our travelers, and it comes down to the line manager. The line manager needs to set that expectation, and I think the company needs to first set the tone. And I think we get that well is that, we don't expect you to be connected 24/7. Even on a business trip, there are boundaries, there are work hours. And I think that's what needs to be set is that, we need to ensure that as managers of people who travel is that, we set those boundaries. You're going on a business trip, you still work your hours. If your work hours are 8 to 5, you stick to the 8 to 5. If deadlines are at risk and, you need to work extra, you need to be online, you need to be connected, that's perfectly fine. But then it's that balance. So I'll give you an example right now is that, working with my team in the UK, they have their office hours. That's how it is. And so, and like yesterday, we were also, I'm like, guys, it's 5 o'clock, go home. Log off, go home. You know, you need to be able to do that as a line manager. And then also you need to have that flexibility as an employee as well, is that you know everything is time sensitive. You have deadlines. And so, for example, today and tomorrow, we are going to work late because Friday is that's it. We're done. We need to be done. And so we are going to be working late. Everyone needs to be connected. Their laptops are going to be on. And I'm like, when it after hours, go on to do not disturb. Everything goes on to do not disturb. You are working, you are focusing, but from a technology perspective, it's do not disturb. That's it. But then also, I will have that flexibility is that, you know, you're putting in the extra effort this week. I don't expect you to then be working full hours next week. Work
Mm.
an hour less every day next week, or work normal hours next week and just take Friday off. It's that level of flexibility, but it's being able to have that culture. It literally comes down to organizational culture and then making sure that that tone is then set with line managers so that you know you can set the expectation with your employees as well. And I think if you do notice that, you know, it's a new employee traveling, like, you know, for the first time, or like, you know, it's the first few trips, it's being able to then have those conversations and say, take time to de-stress, takes time for you. Don't be connected all the time. You know, if you feel that you can't achieve what you need to achieve for this trip because this is too much, reassess what's important, what's not important. But it literally it is going to come down to the tone and the culture within that organization and at the line manager level.
Yeah, I think culture is quite a big one because then it dictates how managers also support the employees. On a personal level, you know, have you ever had to step back or adjust your travel schedule? I mean, I know you did mention that COVID was a blessing in disguise because it allowed you the 2 years, I'm saying 2 hours, the 2 years to literally just work from home. But what are the some of the ways that you could help with to allow travelers to take some time back for the sake of their well-being?
Yes, so I've got so many, I've got good examples. So just one of them is that, you know, when you're traveling, you're constantly on the go. And so, you know, when I first started traveling, you know, it's just breakfast at the hotel, lunch at the office, and then you're going out for dinner every night with different people. And so you're not conscious of what you're eating. And so, you know, if you're traveling once or twice on a work trip, it's okay. As frequently that I'm doing it, you have to be so cognizant of what you're eating when you're eating it, because
Mm.
I actually got to a point where I was 105 kgs. I mean, those of you that know me from my days at GBTA, I got really big. And so, and that was just because just bad eating habits on work. And, you know, it's on the go. So you're just grabbing anything. So, you know, you have to be able to then find that balance and make that decision in terms of, you know, how do I do this? So, for example, now when I travel, breakfast is a no-go for me. I take protein powder with me. I have a protein shake for breakfast. I have coffee and I have a fruit. That's breakfast. Lunch, going to be a sandwich at max. I'm not going to have a full meal at lunch. It's going to be a sandwich. And then that allows me to then eat what I want to at dinner. Because you're having dinner with colleagues, you're having dinner with leadership team. And so, you know, you're going to have that ability to then enjoy a good dinner with your work colleagues. It's what you want to do. And so it allows you that without then sacrificing your health. And so, you know, you learn to adapt in terms of how that works. The other thing is that, you know, uh, this would have been around 2018. I remember I was flying back from Singapore and I was just not feeling well. I was sitting on this plane like something's wrong because I had this really bad headache and I'm like, something's just not right. And so I went into the bathroom and then looked in the mirror and I was gone red. And I mean, I'm dark skinned, getting red, it's like, this is not normal. I'm like,
Mhm.
something's definitely wrong here. And so I remember the aircraft was over Mauritius, and I'm like, okay, just 4 more hours and I'll be in Joburg and then I can sort this out. And then I got home, that was like on the Sunday, and I'm like, okay, I should be fine. Monday, once again, the headache was back and I started feeling really sick, and I was like, something's not right. And so call my GP at like 8 p.m. Like, something's not happening here. You know, this is headache. You know, what should I do? There's this level of dizziness. He's like, check your blood pressure. And it just so happened there was a blood pressure machine that I had. So I checked my blood pressure and it was so high. And he was on the phone. He was like, right, go to the hospital right now because this is a stroke waiting to happen because it was that high. Now, I didn't realize how bad it was. And then when I got to the hospital, they were like, you can't move. They put me on a bed and like put me on a drip, try to bring my blood pressure down. And then they were explaining to me like how high my blood pressure was. They surprised I've not stroked out yet. And you know, all the repercussions of high blood pressure. And then eventually it sunk in how bad this was. Then they
Mm.
medicated me and they're like, we're gonna move you to a ward. I'm like getting off the bed, let's go. They were like, you don't get this. You don't move. The bed and you are moving. You're going to ICU. That's how bad this is.
Wow.
And then I realized how it was. And I spent 3 days in ICU and they tried to get my blood pressure down. But it was all related to stress. It was all the travel. I was traveling extensively. It was coming at the back end of like 4 week trips, 1 week at home. And so constantly traveling, constantly being in the air, and that became a problem. And so, I had then had to make that decision in terms of, what next. And so I had to cancel the trip. I canceled all my travel for the rest of the year because it happened around June. For the rest of the year, in fact, it was canceled for me. So my line manager was like, nope, health comes first. All of these trips are not a priority. All my audits were canceled. Like, that's not happening. We'll restart them. Someone else needs to do them. Your health comes first. And so for 6 months, I just didn't travel. And then I actually, get onto medication, figure out, how do I manage this? How do I manage stress levels? And so, those are the examples of how, well-being can actually take a toll when it comes to travel, especially when you travel really frequently. And I think as the travel managers and, as the organization, we just need to keep that in mind is that, people that travel frequently for work do get burnout. It does affect their mental health and it does affect their well-being. And we need to be able to then be cognizant of that and figure out how do we help them manage it and how do we get this right and find that balance.
Yeah. So you've mentioned quite a lot of points that I wanted us to touch on. So traveling also gives you that opportunity to connect, right? So one of the most rewarding parts of business travel is meeting people from different cultures. However, diet, food is is a connector of people. So
Correct.
how do you, and there are studies that have also shown that frequent travelers, besides the high blood pressure, which is real, many frequent travelers actually end up having high blood pressure. It happened to me as well, by the way. I ended up with high blood pressure and had to go under treatment for about a year and a half. But there are other areas, especially like obesity, which is another area where frequent travelers also suffer from. How do you prepare for that, for the interactions? Because again, it's the human connection, it's the meals, it's building a team, through food and dinners. And how do you help that? How do you take that back to start building an environment of trust, without having misunderstandings, so where you have to make choices and say, okay, for breakfast, I'm going to have a shake instead of having a full breakfast while everybody else is having breakfast. How do you navigate that?
So I actually set the expectation upfront, like especially with like if I'm traveling, like most of the time I'm traveling with the team, and I let them know that I'm not having breakfast. It's not going to be happening every day. There are certain days where I will sit and have breakfast. It's not going to be every day. On the weekends, Saturday and Sunday, I will sit down with the team and I will have breakfast. And those are the expectations I set upfront, and then we have a discussion about like why. I mean, the team knows this is my reasons behind it, why it's not happening, and I'm like, we will have those engagements during lunch. We will have those engagements during dinner. But if, like, for example, someone wants to do a dinner that, it's going to be a connection or it's a network or it's someone that we need to meet because it's a discussion, I will go to those meetings. I won't turn them down. But then it's about making those choices in terms of what you're going to eat. And so,
Yes.
you need to make those healthy choices. Like, can I eat whatever I want today? Or am I going to make a healthy choice today? And it's about being able to then you making the decision, but I will not turn down a meal. So if someone invites me, I won't turn it down, but then I will attend it, but then I will make the healthy choice in terms of what I'm eating. And so, it's about being able to do that because I always believe that, you make good connections, you do really good networking at these meals, the conversations that you have are really good. And so, it does help you. It helps you personally and professionally. And so I always ensure that, when those engagements are happening, I'm present, but then I also make that decision in terms of, everyone's going out, So I'll give you an example. Everyone's going out. We're going to have a good dinner at a steakhouse. I'm like, I'll have the steak. I won't have the sauce. I'll have a salad with it. I'm having water, if I'm having a Coke Zero, it's balancing that out rather than having the steak and having a mushroom sauce with it and then having chips with it and then having as many cocktails as I want to. I won't do that. So it's about making the personal choice and those balancing it out in terms of how I do it. And then obviously coupled with that, I will always make sure that I make time to go to the gym. So that's how I do it, is that no matter what, when these business trips, for example, especially on this trip, I've been going to the gym. Like last night, I was at the gym at 11 p.m. and people thought I was insane. But I'm like, I've made the decision that 11 p.m. to 12 p.m. will be my gym time because I just
Mm.
need to go to the gym at least 1 hour a day. So, it's about balancing your time and managing your time as well when it comes to that.
Yeah. So let's talk about data. I mean, travel is all about data and understanding how you can translate the data to make wiser decisions, smart policy changes, and all of that. So you did your MBA dissertation on ancillary services. One of our well-known airlines even applied some of the learnings from your study. So what were some of the key takeaways from that research, and how could that information be used today, especially from a supplier perspective? In supporting frequent travelers such as yourself?
Yes, so I looked at ancillary products and services because, we started unbundling much later than the US and like the European Union. And so those airlines unbundled pretty quickly and, things just went south for them. And I think we took a slow approach to unbundling and we've not fully unbundled in South Africa. So I was looking at, what is the appetite of unbundling? And then looked at it from a value perspective. What is it that business travelers value on a product with an airline? And if they valued it, will they actually pay for it? So, for example, if you unbundle baggage, because we knew that with any booking you made, you got check-in luggage. That was just the norm. But now that you take that out and it's not included in the airfare, is it something that the business traveler valued? And now that it's not included, will they actually pay for it? And so,
Mm,
from an airline perspective, is that an extra revenue stream, or have you just angered a traveler because you've taken away something that was once free, and now they're just not going to pay for it because they don't value it? Well, airline, you've lost the revenue stream. So, it's that point of thing. And so, one of the interesting things that came out of it is that on long trips, that bag needs to be included, irrespective. And so, when you book, for example, with South African Airways, for example, because I looked at it in South African context, there is no airfare with just hand luggage. Whereas you go to like Lufthansa or an Air France, there is what they have, a light fare. And I mean, you can book a ticket to Frankfurt or to Paris with just hand luggage. I mean, not
mm,
many people are traveling long haul with just hand luggage unless you're going for 1 to 2 days. And so, those bags need to be included. And so, those are one of the things that I looked at from a business traveler perspective. On long haul travel, the bag needs to be included in the airfare. You cannot unbundle that.
mm,
But what you can unbundle is food, funny enough, is that not many travelers are keen on the food on a long haul flight because the quality of the food is not up to standard, especially in economy class. And so, travelers will forego the meal if you drop the airfare. And then if you sell a meal on board, you sell a more premium quality on board, they're willing to pay for that. So that's an interesting concept. So there are some airlines where you can choose to then upgrade your economy class meal to the premium economy meal and pay the difference. And you know what? It's working. So, for example, Singapore Airlines has a very interesting concept. Is that if you're traveling in a premium cabin, like you're traveling in business class or premium economy on most of their routes, it's called Book the Cook.
mm,
You can pick your meal and you can pick your meal in advance. You have the option from 32 meal options that you can pick it. And some of it's free, some of it has a little bit of an additional payment to it. And like I do it all the time. I've been traveling frequently with Singapore Airlines. I always go with the cook, book the cook, because then I know I've picked my meal. I know what I'm eating. I know what it's going to be on board. The quality is going to be a little better. I'm willing to pay the $5 a little bit extra out of my own pocket for that little bit of a better meal service. So, that's an unbundling that's worked in their favor. So, what was interesting on those insights is that, what is that business traveler willing to pay for and what they're not willing to pay for. And so that was great insights for airlines that, in the South African context, this is what you can unbundle, this is what you can't unbundle.
mm,
And unfortunately, international airlines seem to be getting it wrong in terms of unbundling. So, for example, we know that Emirates has gone and unbundled business class. I'm like, why would you go and unbundle a premium product? That's just a no-go zone because the fare on itself justifies everything that's included. But Emirates has gone
mm,
ahead and unbundled business class where you can't pick a seat in advance, you don't have lounge access. And Emirates, the norm is you book a business class ticket, chauffeur services is included with that.
included.
But
Mm,
now with the unbundling, even that's been stripped off. So I'm like, now this business class airfare has become a bare bones. It's a ticket and a meal. That's it. And
mm,
lately, Qatar Airways has done the exact same thing. They've unbundled business class where there's no lounge access included. And I'm like, that's a norm. And for a business traveler, that's a no-no. And it's not really published. The problem is that, we book it And then you rock up at the lounge, they're like, well, your airfare doesn't include lounge access. No one knows this. It's not
Yeah.
published. It's not out there. And so, yes, unbundle, but then make sure that your consumer is aware that what they're booking doesn't include these items. So, it's those things that we just need to be aware of. But yeah, the insights has been good. And so I think it's, unbundling in the South African market, we've got the balance right. I do
Mm-hmm.
think outside of the South African market, we've just gone to two extremes. But I get the concept as well in terms of why we've gone to the two extremes. So, like, in the United States, for example, you've got the big three, which is Delta, United, and American, and they've got the concept of basic economy. And,
Mm,
with basic economy, you book that ticket, there's no luggage. The only bag you can take is one that fits under the seat in front of you. You don't have access to the overhead locker. You
mm,
cannot pick a seat in advance. And guess what? You can't even pick a seat at check-in. The seats assigned to you when you board the aircraft. And
yes,
guess
yes.
what? That will be a middle seat. No matter what, that will be a middle seat because you're getting the last seats. And if you book basic economy, you're the last passengers to board because they will board everyone else. Their
Mm,
premiums will then get additional seats. They will get moved to better seats and stuff. And then when they're boarding your basic economy, all the middle seats go. So it's about keeping that in mind is that, that airfare has been done like that because they need to compete with the low-cost carriers because
mm,
Spirit and Frontier has been eating away at the low-cost market. And so these carriers decided, we're not going to go and start our own low-cost division like most airlines have tried in the past. Some have failed, some have worked.
yeah.
And so they've decided, let's just compete with our own metal. We'll offer a low-cost product on our existing metal. And that's what they've done. And so,
Mm,
as a business traveler, as a travel manager, you need to be aware that that market is leisure. That product is leisure. And so, from a Cummins perspective, we don't sell basic economy. Our
mm,
systems will not sell you basic economy. And if you're booking through a consultant, they will not offer you basic economy because of all the restrictions that go with it. And so, it's being able to then identify that and then say, this does not work for business travel. I will not allow it.
yeah. So again, it's all about data. So how can travel buyers use the data to firstly shape policy? Because like you say, you don't sell basic economy. So which means your OBT or your tool is already configured not to even sell those or make it available for the traveler to book, right? So that's your travel policy side. However, on the negotiation side, I mean, you mentioned that some of this information is not available, so a travel buyer or procurement might be negotiating a contract with the airline, and this information is not mentioned, and they're pushing price over the bundled or the more expensive fares. So how would they use this kind of data to better customize the travel offering for the frequent travelers, but at the same time ensure that the organization is getting the best bang for their buck?
Correct. I think that's so important. And it's about striking that, for one, I always say that your travel suppliers are your partners. There needs to be robust discussions all the time with them. When you have your review meetings, you need to go with your armor of data. So I think the first step is always seeking feedback from your travelers. And I think that works well. I'm constantly providing Majid with feedback in terms of what's happening. So I always look at it, when I want to make a buying decision in my personal capacity when it comes to a hotel, I'm going to go to TripAdvisor and read the reviews. What are travelers saying about this hotel? What are they saying about the experience? And based on that, I'll make my buying decision. It's so important that, I contribute back to TripAdvisor. So when I travel and I stay at a hotel, I'll do a review so that I can contribute to that data. It's the same thing when it comes to business travel. We need to be able to feedback data, negative and positive, back to our travel managers, and they need to be able to use that data to have robust discussions with our travel suppliers. I think that is so important, is that, when something's not working, use that data because then you've got examples of why it's not working. And then you need to use that to be able to either need to renegotiate or fix it. And I always say is that price is one thing, but it needs to be taken into consideration with everything else. There's this whole concept of total cost of ownership. Price is one concept, but to take into consideration everything else that comes with it. So sometimes don't go for the cheapest because the cheapest is not going to give you the best value. It's not going to keep your traveler happy, and it just doesn't work for you. So it's about being able to understand that firstly. But
Mm,
also, it's being able to then have that discussion. Once you've got that data, and I always say, data-driven decision making is the best. Once you've got that data, you can have that discussion with your supplier with real life examples in terms of why it's working, why it's not working. And then when you go into your negotiation for the next round, you can then go, over the last period of the contract, this has worked, this has not worked, we need to look at this. I maybe need to put in some certain clauses that's going to make sure that this doesn't happen again. If that's happened again, I'm going to penalize you. It's as simple as that.
Mm.
And so, it's being able to do that. Like, I'll give you examples. And so where we've used that data and decided, this is not going to work. So, for example, one of them is Lyft. Lyft is out there. They're a good airline. The product is good. And it was good until a point in time. And
Mm.
so Lyft used to use, like we all know, Lyft is not an airline. They don't have a license. It's all global. It's all global aviation. It's global aviation's license and stuff. It's global aircraft. But when Lyft started, it was during COVID. There was an oversupply of aircraft. And so Global had the opportunity to put all the aircraft into Lyft and let them fly into the domestic market, which means it was consistent. The product was consistent, the aircraft was consistent. We now where there's a shortage of aircraft, so it's more lucrative for the Global aircraft to be elsewhere, not necessarily with Lyft. And so Lyft is now sourcing aircraft from everybody. They've got Africa Charter with them, they've got Star Air Cargo with them, so the consistency of the product is gone. But during that transition phase, when there was like shortage of aircraft, they were canceling flights. And when they were canceling flights, they were then rebooking passengers directly onto Sapphire. And so I had 3 bookings of mine that went directly onto Sapphire because Lyft decided to move me. But the pain with that is they made group bookings
Group
with Sapphire.
bookings. Mm.
And
Mm.
when you make a group booking, they were not giving you the booking reference. They were not telling you what was going on. They just said you're booked on a flight. You then need to rock up at the airport and check in at the counter. As a business traveler, I'm like, my 6:30 a.m. flight, I've checked in online. I've got no bags. I'm actually getting to the airport at 4:45 and just walking onto the aircraft. Now I need to buffer in an additional hour because I need to check in at the counter. And you're not actually giving me a booking. The second thing is that I can't pick a seat in advance now. I need to get a seat at the counter. That's a problem for me. I can't even add priority boarding if I wanted to make my life easier. I've lost complete control of the booking, and you're now adding admin and processes into this for me. And so that's just not working for you. And that's where you've got a supplier that's just not taking the traveler in mind. You've added all the admin onto the traveler without being able to provide them with that booking reference. And so I push back. I'm like, guys, I want to be able to check in online. I want to pick my seat. I still want my priority boarding if you're moving me onto Sapphire because the Sapphire experience is very different. And so I had to push back and get Lyft to do it for me. And so someone got back to me and said, we can't assist you. And then I was like, that's fine. I reached out to Madden, stop selling Sapphire. I mean, stop selling Lyft until they get this right, because this is just painful. And so based on
Mm.
that feedback, we just stopped selling Sapphire. I mean, we stopped selling Lyft until, they stabilize. And I think right now they've still not stabilized because there's just no consistency on product. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
it's being able to use that feedback and to decide, is this feedback, what do we do with it? Is it going to help my traveler, or is it just something that, it's just noise? Because I always say you need to be able to take the feedback of the travel manager and say, is this something that I need to action? Or is it something that's
Mhm.
just noise? Or is it just a once off, So it's being able to then use that as a travel manager and make that decision based on the data that you're given.
Yeah. So, talking about then the transparency, the data, and how you translate that into actionable steps. So, the GDS, to a certain extent, provided that stability or the transparency as well, for the booking tools, because there was that clarity on what fare is being booked and what is included in the fare. For the travel agents, they understood what exactly is displayed on the GDS. I mean, it took years and years, I think over 40 years, to develop the GDS as we know it today. However, come NDC, I think it was initially launched about 12 years ago. And obviously, the objective, or what we know it as, it's to simplify the booking process and to bring the supplier, the airline, closer to the consumer. So there has been a lot of frustration from the traditional agency side or the TMC side, because we are also reliant, they're also reliant on the global distribution channels. Markets like South Africa, for example, where the transition has been very slow and almost like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, one step back. I mean, I read an article in the ETNW of an agent that sent out a long open letter talking about the pressures of having to move or being forced to move into booking NDC contents, because obviously the suppliers, the airlines are marketing NDC content directly to the consumer, and the consumer, who is the frequent traveler, is going back to the organization to say, I want to be able to book this content. However, the integration between the TMC systems and the airline systems, as well as the traveler, is still quite fragmented. How do you think this, I think there's also wins and losses on both sides in terms of NDC. And how do you think this is affecting travel programs going forward? And what are kind of the pitfalls to look out for from a travel buyer perspective, but from the airline perspective, where are the opportunities to do it a little bit better than the global north, where NDC is much more adopted?
Funny enough is that I think it comes down to each corporate in terms of how they've embraced NDC, and it comes down to the TMC. So I can put it into our context is that we've actually embraced NDC much better in South Africa than we actually have in our other markets. So, we use online booking tools in different markets. And so, in the US, we've got one booking tool. Across Europe, it's a different booking tool. Within South Africa, it's a homegrown booking tool, which is like even better than what we actually have in the US and the UK, which is amazing. And I think that's the difference is that, we've partnered with the TMC that's done really good integration with NDC. And so, for example, our online booking tool will bring you NDC content and will bring you GDS content. And the reason for that is that you do have airlines and you do have several suppliers that just don't make some content available through the GDS. It's only available on the NDC platform. And so, for example, let's look at Lufthansa. And I think this is across the board with all airlines, to be quite honest with you. If you want to book Lufthansa through the GDS, there's a GDS booking fee of like almost 850 rands. Let's get honest with that's a steep fee for just using the GDS. So as an organization, as a traveler, I need to pay 850 rands more if I want to book with the GDS. Then I need to pay my TMC, their service fee for that booking. That's going to take me over the 1,000 rand mark just for making the booking, not even what its ticket's going to cost. Then Lufthansa only makes certain fare classes available in the GDS. And so your cheaper fare classes are only available through NDC. Automatically, if you don't offer NDC content as a TMC, and if you're going to rely purely on GDC, you're going to be outpriced by the airline because you don't have access to the content. And as a traveler, I have availability to see, am I getting the best price here? Is this the cheapest option? And I think it frustrates travelers and it does frustrate bookers because we can see there's a cheaper airfare. Why is my TMC not offering it? And I think we have that benefit where our South African online booking tool does offer that. And so, for example, I can see the content. And what's nice about it, it actually tells me it's NDC. I can see that it's telling me this is coming from the GDS, this is NDC content, and I can see the difference in pricing. So, for example, this trip, I needed to, let's use a different example. I have the team going to Nigeria in August. And so I booked from South Africa point of sale on our online booking tool. South African Airways got the rest of the teams traveling from different points in the UK via Amsterdam on KLM. Online booking tool point of sale, they're booking it in the UK. That online booking tool right now is not integrating all NDC content. Immediately, the airfare that was coming through on the booking tool for KLM was £1,000 more. We're talking about 22,000 rand more. And 4 tickets. That's 88,000 rand for 4 people over and above what I'm seeing on NDC. That's how more expensive it was. And then I went onto our online booking tool in South Africa and I'm going there and I'm like, okay, let me just check point of sale. What is it going to cost me? Heathrow to Lagos. I can see what they're seeing because they're seeing the GDS airfare. They're seeing a higher airfare class as well. I'm seeing the NDC content. I'm seeing a 20,000 rand cheaper airfare. We can't see that. And so I'm not going to book it on my booking tool because one, I'm going to charge the card in ZAR and it's going to become a problem. And, I don't want to go through all of that. But what's nice is that we've got flexibility. In that instance, we can book direct. In that instance, we booked all those tickets directly with the airline on the airline's website, given, that comes with its own risk when you need to change it and stuff like that. But that was what we did because I'm like, I'm saving 88,000 rand. I am booking it directly with the airline. And that's where it's so important. TMCs need to realize is that that's a lost sale for you. That's lost revenue
Mm.
because that's where you've just lost the booking fee. And if there's any commission due from the airline as well, you've lost that as well. So just keep in mind is that, it's a lost sale. So TMCs need to be able to say, I need to start embracing NDC and find ways to integrate that NDC content so that it's available to my booker. And I think that's so important is that we need to embrace it and make it available. And I think TMCs are getting there. I think
Mm.
we are lucky in the case in terms of the TMC we use on the online booking tool. They've
Mm.
done a brilliant job of integrating it because I see it. And keep in mind, there's this thing about OTAs, your online travel agencies. And so,
Yeah.
your booking.coms, your Agodas and stuff like that. They are predominantly leisure agents, okay? Their market is leisure. None of their airfares. So, like, for example, booking.com started as a hotel booking engine. Now, if you go to booking.com, you can book flights, you can book sightseeing, you can book airport transfers.
Mm.
None of it is GDS. Nothing is GDS. It's all NDC. And so if booking.com has completely brought you your entire travel offering in the leisure sense without a GDS, why our traditional TMC still playing catch up and having this heavy reliance on the GDS? And I'll give you an example. I, in my leisure capacity, book my travel through the OTAs. They will offer you an airfare no one else can offer you. In some
Mm.
instances, the airfare is even cheaper than the airline because they've got an NDC airfare and they've got it negotiated and they've got bulk buying power, especially with hotels. Now, given that, this is where our TMC has become a little bit innovative because they've realized is that, they've got their negotiated rates with hotels. We've got our corporate negotiated hotel rates, but they're like, we can integrate with these OTAs. And so our online booking tool is integrated with booking.com group. And so you'll see hotel rates coming through. That's from Agoda, booking.com, Get Your Guide, and things like that. And it's telling you, we've pulled this from booking.com. We've pulled this from Agoda. This is what you can book. And we only do it for hotels. So keep in mind, and it'll tell you what the restrictions are with that. I kid you not. I'll give you an example. There's a Marriott hotel where our corporate negotiated rate, I mean, it's fully flexible, it includes breakfast, it's $350 a night. It's pulled a booking.com rate of $150.
Wow.
I'm like, that's no brainer for me. I'm saving $153 a night. I'm going to book the booking.com rate. And that's what I like about it. I call it rich content. It's pulled everything. It's done its shopping for me and it's giving me multiple options. I can book what I want to book, but it also tells me you're choosing to book with booking.com. This is the
Mm.
restrictions. This is how it works. If we are going to be making changes, these are the terms and conditions. A travel agent will pick it up. So a consultant will pick it up and make the changes for you directly with booking.com. But keep in mind, you've booked through that provider. So I think, embrace it. And I love the way our South African TMC has done it. They've embraced it. They've brought all that content in. And so
Mm.
it's made the experience for the travel booker or the traveler much better because I've got all the content in front of me because it can be really frustrating when you're trying to book something and you can get it cheaper and your TMC just can't give it to you at that price. And that comes down to flexibility within our travel management program is that we have policy. Policy says you have to book with the TMC because of
Mm.
duty of care and everything else that goes with it. But we have that level of flexibility. When the pricing is so out, you can book directly with the airline and we'll capture that on our own systems from a tracking perspective. So you book it with the airline, send an email to our security team. They'll log that PNR and they'll track it. It's as simple as that. And
Yeah.
so it's that flexibility. But when it comes down to NDC, I'm like, guys, it's here to stay. Let's
Brilliant.
embrace it. And we need to understand that, understand it from the supplier. These airlines are paying a lot to just have the content on the GDS. To eliminate that cost, they've come up with the NDC. But with that, they've got flexibility because all the ancillary products and services could not be handled through the GDS. The GDS could not allow you to then unbundle and then allow you to pick a bag, add this, add that. Well, it's NDC does. And so the business model for the airlines have changed. The GDS has stayed back in the 60s. Nothing's changed. And so I'm like, no one's playing catch up. And so I think it's what you want. The GDSs are doing it now. I think a lot of GDSs are putting front ends. And so the front ends work off the GDS, it works off the NDC, and you can get that. So I think we're getting there. But I think
Mm.
it's too late. I mean, we're playing catch up.
Good job. Yeah. Wow. So let me just take a pause and see if there are any questions in the chat before we move on to our next question. No, no questions there. So you've shared quite a lot of insights, I mean, from your experience as a traveler, but also understanding the travel industry. I think travelers can also act as partners to the companies, right? To suppliers as well as the suppliers as well as their company. Can you, to just close it off and round it off, how share some insights where you've helped shape your organization's travel policy and help to improve the travel experience of your colleagues within your organization?
I just think it comes once again back to those feedback. I mean, feedback and robust discussions. But I think what's good is that, people still come to me within the organization for help. They're like, I've got a complex routing, please help me. And, that's where I get involved, like, let's look at this, let's look at these options. Have you considered maybe booking separate tickets? Because, it will work out cheaper if we do it like this, provided there's no connections on it, because then that's a different issue altogether. It's working with that. So people do come for advice, but I think they do go to Madden and Yvonne as well. So I think it's about, being a true advisor in the travel space is what your travel manager needs to be. And so it's being able to have the traveler to come to you for advice and ask you, how do we do this? But I'll give you one example is that, I was in the office in Joburg last year, and we were just having discussions, and one of our senior execs was traveling, and so it was a complex itinerary, and they were just talking about, the booker, so his PA did the booking. She was like, I finally got this done, he needed to go from South Africa, he was going to spend some time in Singapore, then from Singapore, he needed to spend some time in China, from China, he needed to go to Spain, and then from Spain, it was to come back home. I was like, that was interesting, like, how they booked it, we got separate tickets booked. One of the interesting things, being a US company, there's certain things we can't do. And one of the things is that, we start putting restrictions in. So, for example, if any airline's going to go through Israeli or it's going to go through that region in terms of airspace, we're not allowed to use them. And so based on that, we've limited certain airlines and we've limited some routings, and we've done it in our systems. You just can't book those airlines or book those routings. Another thing is that, with what's going on in Russia right now, we're not allowed to fly through Chinese airspace. And so because those aircraft will go through the Chinese airspace and through the Russian airspace and stuff like that to get to Europe. And so we needed to make sure that that was done. And so, we've blocked it. But with this specific trip and this itinerary, just based on discussions, they were talking about, he was going on China Southern and it's going, from Beijing and it's going to Madrid. And I'm like, hold on right there. Chinese airlines are using Russian airspace. How did that booking slip through? And so this was made by a consultant. And, uh, if it was booked on our online booking tool, it would have stopped it. This is where, something just crept through. And so we went through it and, we had to provide feedback and, get this rebooked and then make sure that, TMC, hey, we're not allowed to book airlines. It's going to go through Russian airspace. This is one that's went through. Let's have robust discussions. Let's not have it's happened again. So it's being able to then see those experiences, see those feedback, and stop it when you can stop it. But I think it's about having that partnership. It's being able to have that. Another one for me is just recently I flew with Ethiopian Airlines. And so this is a big thing for me is that, Ethiopian Airlines can be such a hit and miss. You can have an amazing flight with them. You can have the worst flight ever with them. And so there's just no consistency. And I'm like, if a supplier is not going to offer you consistency, there's a no-go for me, because if I'm paying for something, I want to know what I'm getting. So I flew on one of their fifth freedom routes between Seoul and Tokyo, and it was an economy class. It was like a 2.5 hour flight. I'm like, you know what? On that flight, it's going to be 2 bags. I'm Star Gold. I'm going to get 3 bags. I don't need 3 bags, but it's going to be a meal. I get priority boarding. All of the benefits that go with my Star Gold. So I'm like, it's no brainer. Let me book it. And so that aircraft originated in Addis, came to Seoul, and then it continued on to Tokyo. That aircraft was one of the oldest aircraft in the fleet. The seats were broken. The TV was not working. My seatbelt was disgusting. It was just a horrible experience. The seats were not clean, and the aircraft was just not cleaned when it landed. So you sat on the aircraft after 11 hours and you're continuing your journey. So it's about then providing that feedback and then deciding, am I going to book Ethiopian again? I'm not going to book Ethiopian again because the product was not consistent. And the same thing, I always say is that in my personal capacity and in the company capacity, This is my budget. If my budget is going to buy me a BMW, I'm going to buy a BMW. If I'm going to pay for the BMW, why am I going to accept a Corolla? And I think that talks to like the product offering out there and being aware of it. So for example, let's talk SAA. SAA is flying to Perth. The Perth route, we know, is the old A340s. That product is ancient. It is not competitive anymore. For now, if I want convenience and I want a direct flight and I just want to get there, I have no option. It's just SAA. There's no competition. So for the frequency of the flights, for the direct flight, I'm going to forego product and say, okay, I'm going to pay for my BMW. I'm going to accept the Corolla that SAA is going to offer me for what I'm paying. You know, that comparison. But have and behold, Qantas will be back on the Joburg Perth route very soon. Now there's competition. I will not be buying SAA. I'll be buying Qantas because now paying for the BMW, getting a BMW. Whereas in SAA, I'm paying for the BMW, I'm getting a Corolla. So SAA now needs to realize my prices need to drop in order to be competitive on the route. You cannot change the same price as Qantas because your product is not the same. And I think that's where, you know, as travel managers, we need to make that decision and make sure that, you know, if I've got someone going to Perth, and you've got these options, the preference needs to be Qantas because pricing and products align, whereas pricing and product SCA will not be aligned because now there's competition. So, you know, it's about using that feedback and knowing this information and then using it to make those buying decisions in terms of, you know, how we're going to be buying.
Yeah. Wow. So that's quite a lot of information. Thank you so much, Kovilan. Thank you for sharing your insights and experiences with us, and giving us the realities of looking at business travel and managing stress and staying productive. To our
Cool.
travel buyers that have joined us, I hope this conversation has sparked some ideas around how travel policies can better support the well-being of your travelers, whether it's through flexible bookings, clearer boundaries around digital availability, or wellness-focused travel programs. And to our suppliers, hotels, car rental companies, airlines especially, we hope this has offered a window for you to look at seasoned travelers and how their needs are evolving, the convenience, flight connectivity, reducing travel friction, and also supporting recovery for the travelers. To everyone listening, thank you for being part of this conversation. We hope it was inspiring. And remember that it is recorded, so it will be available on our platforms. Join us on LinkedIn or Facebook, and you can also share this recording with your colleagues. Remember, if you're not a member, please join GBTSA Southern Africa, as well as remember to register for our conference that is coming up. In closing, Kovilan, any final remarks? Thank you.
One disclaimer, you know, we're recording it and, you know, we're putting it out there, you know, I'm in the compliance space. So one of the things I just need to put a disclaimer out there, you know, the views and information and opinions that have been expressed are my own content. They not necessarily reflect the views of Cummins, and that none of the data used or communicated is confidential and it's been gained from my own experiences. So just keep that in mind. This is me.
Absolutely. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. So we'll end the call and we'll talk again next month. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.